Welcome to our product ownership workshop. First, I'd like to say that PXR 2020 is brought to you by Single Thread Theatre Company and Electric Company Theatre, in thanks to our community partners, Toasterlab and Langara Center for the Entertainment Arts, and with the funding support of the Canada Council for the Arts' Digital Strategies Fund. I would like to acknowledge that I am speaking to you today live from the stolen territories of the Coast Salish people here in Vancouver, BC. They are the homes to the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, and I would like to acknowledge, especially on a day such as the Thanksgiving weekend, that I am very privileged to be where I am with the technology that I have, to be gathered with you all here. Bring it around to the moment that we're in. Now, for those of you who attended the workshop last weekend, you learned how to utilize the cohort programming on your mobile devices to create interactive works. We will now hear from that exact same team on how to organize and develop your own practices when mixing technologies and mediums. So Jacob, take it away. Thanks so much.
All right. The first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is to meet us over on the green circle. All right. One of my goals for today is, because we're here in VR together, to as part of this session, just experiment a bit with social conversational dynamics in VR. The first question is, can everybody hear me? Awesome. I love, one of my favorite things from sessions so far in VR has been the degree of interruptibility. Because I am a person who tends to like over talk, and so it's very, very useful if people are able to interrupt me.
I agree.
And so I just wanted to make sure. Who was that? Great. Yes, the right track. But for this to be a thing, we have to be close enough that we can all hear each other without using the amplify, raise your hand to speak model. So I'm going to try that. But if at any point you find that you can't hear me, please let me know and we can switch over to, loudspeaker amplifying mode, which it feels like should just come on automatically if I do this with my hands, but there's a feature for later. The first thing I wanted to do is a little physical grounding in the space. So I would like us all to come onto the circle. You might be close with other people. We'll see how that feels. I know it's weird during COVID times. Come onto the circle and face the monolith. And we're just going to do a little salutation to the monolith that Beth and her team and her participants put together for us. So we're going to start facing the monolith. Take a look around, make sure you've got enough space in your real physical space. Arms together. Lean a bit to the right. Lean a bit to the left. Now, as your arms come down, just gently let your head tilt forward. And at some point, this will cause your body to spin around weirdly. Okay, just give it a moment to let your neck relax, because you've been using it really hard holding up this VR headset. Drop your controllers, shake out your fingers a little bit, shake out your hands a little bit. I'm just going to turn around so I can see what this looks like, because I was curious. Great. If you're in 2D, then you can absolutely do all of this. We just won't see you do it. Okay. Bring it back up. Overhead. All right. Take a breath in and a breath out. The next thing we're going to do is repeat that, but we're going to finish up lying on the ground, because that's pretty much how 2020 is feeling so far. That's my postural response to 2020. So we'll bring our arms up and we'll roll down our spine and come to a position where you can see the large black rectangle over our heads. All right. Can I ask Aiden or Alex to hit the go on that? Aiden or Alex?
1 second.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep talking, Jacob. Sorry, I just I might have to.
All right, I'm being instructed to keep talking. So one thing I was really curious about, from a product ownership point of view, a lot of things don't get done, and so often my first response when I'm in a new technical environment or using a new piece of software is to hunt for the edges. What didn't get done? What did not get implemented? And it's a bit of a way to sort of understand something by seeing where it starts to break, which is a principle that I use a lot. I'm probably going to suggest that you come back to the video if it's going to take a lot longer.
Oh, give me 30 seconds. 30 seconds.
All right. Let's finish off our physical warm-up with a little hand and wrist work. So the first thing we'll try is just figure eights. This is still holding your controllers. Great. And let's try some offering hands. So that's going to sweep in from the side, come up to the center. Sweep in from the side, come up to the center. Great. Okay, it looks like we might be getting a second video. All good.
Are you able to move that, Jacob?
Which one?
The new one that I just thrown up there.
I have just recorded as a turtle.
Here, I got it.
So,
I got it.
okay. Hey, all right. So find somewhere where you can see this.
I'm Jacob Niedzwiecki, and I'm a creative technologist. I grew up backstage. My first career was as a ballet dancer and choreographer. I've been coding since I was 7, and over the last couple years, I created apps in collaboration with some really interesting theater and dance artists. Cohort is a way to take the capabilities we've created together and make them available to more creators. The Cohort development team is made up of myself, Luke Garwood, Amanda Baker, and Nabil Kassam. So what can you do with Cohort? You can load sound, video, and images into a custom app. You can borrow devices from us and load that app onto them for your show. Or you can use your own devices. Or you can submit it to the App Store and have your audience download it. You can trigger playback of sound and video on cue, either from our admin website on a laptop or phone, or directly from QLab. You can also cue text to appear and trigger device vibrations. What can you do with this? Well, we can have a quick look at what some of our partner companies have done. It's Not a Box Theater used Cohort to create a documentary theater piece called Over Here, where storytellers share their stories in their neighborhoods with audiences. Bluemouth Inc. used Cohort to enhance their theater piece Café Sarajevo, using 3D 360 video to immerse audiences in locations throughout the Balkans. Peggy Baker Dance Projects used Cohort to guide participants of all abilities and let them feel what it's like to invent and enjoy movement together. There's also a few capabilities that have been used by our partner companies but aren't quite ready for public release yet. Adelheid Dance Projects used push notifications and text cues to guide audiences around a huge indoor-outdoor site in their work Lot X, to create an augmented reality public installation, and to offer closed captioning for deaf and hard of hearing audience members. And I used Cohort in my work Jackeries to cue augmented reality scenes that overlay projection-style graphics and video onto a live performer. Cohort is open source and free for anyone to use. In addition to production uses in theaters and in site-specific works, it's really helpful for quickly testing out ideas and making prototypes. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out cohort.rocks or email us at cohortrocks@gmail.com. Thanks to our partner companies, to the Canada Council for the Arts Digital Strategy Fund, and to Heidi Strauss and Rachel
All
Penny
right.
Adelheid for
Now,
making this all
if you're on the
possible.
ground, just take a good 10 count to get up and work through that in a very deliberate way because your space is a bit strange right now. So we're going to slowly move back to our feet. make sure we're not going to smash into anything in our space, and we're going to reconvene on the green circle. It seems like we have a few more people joining us now, so I will repeat what I said earlier, which is just I'm testing this out without amplification, so that we can see if it's possible to like keep a conversational flow going. If at any point, so that means we have to stay pretty close. If at any point you can't hear me, just say so, let me know, and we'll switch to amplifying and raising hands. All right. The other thing I just want to mention is that if you see me do weird movement like this, it is me checking my notes, which I will do occasionally as we go. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you see me doing this, it's the same reason. Okay, we're going to kick this off. That video provided a bit of context and background on Cohort and what we do and what we're up to. Personally, I'm Jacob, in case you missed that. My colleague Amanda Baker is here from Cohort right over there. Hey, look, I can point. Today we're going to be talking about product ownership. My practice as an artist is grounded in movement, media, and code. I grew up as a ballet dancer, started programming as a kid, started making movies as a teenager, and so that's kind of the territory that I play in. With Cohort, I'm in more of a technical facilitator role. Sometimes I get called a technological dramaturg, and I really enjoy helping other artists figure out how to accomplish things that they want to do technically. So before we talk about how Cohort has conceived of and organized our product ownership roles, it's probably a good idea just to talk about what sort of a traditional model of product ownership looks like in the tech industry. And really, sorry, notes again. Wow, this is very awkward. Okay. An experience I had as a live stream director, which I spent a couple years doing, mostly with dance on screen, I started to conceive of my role as a director as being the final person who was responsible to the audience for for the experience we're offering them. And that, I think, is the best way I can explain or analogize the traditional idea of product ownership in tech. It's the person who really should always have the user first in their head. There's a lot of balancing different priorities, of course, but I think that that's a reasonable working definition of a product owner, is the person who bears final responsibility for the experience that's being offered. In tech land, that sort of role evolved out of the gradual failure of project owners. And the breakdown there is that product owners have a sense of continuity. They have a sense of, hey, our users are with us for 5 years, for 10 years. We need to make sure that we are still maintaining a consistent story for them. And so project-based work tends to fall apart as organizations grow and get bigger. It gets a lot harder unless you're doing the exact same type of projects repeatedly, which would be sort of the case in a large national theater company. It's organized on a project basis, but the projects themselves fall into very consistent slots and very consistent formats. And so you can really apply like organizational templates. What does each show need? Okay, great, we can reuse that paperwork and those functions across all the shows. But as companies grow and as teams grow, and as we know from people in this group who make adventurous work, our work doesn't really fall into consistent templates. Okay, I'm gonna try. Thanks, Aiden. I just got a note that my audio was getting a bit glitchy, so I'm gonna try turning on amplification. And if that doesn't work, hello, probably I'm now much too loud. Please keep telling me if my audio gets glitchy again, Aiden, and I will move closer to my Wi-Fi router. Yeah, so our work tends to not fall into easy templates or easy repeatable patterns. And so product ownership emerges in those environments as a way to establish lines of responsibility and also as a way to coordinate the activities of multiple teams. A product owner in tech will tend to have a team or teams that they are essentially responsible for, and will work really closely with the customer or the user or the client. Basically, however that that word gets changed a lot as we move between disciplines: audience, player, participant, attendee. So that's kind of a, oh, and then the last thing I'll mention, which many of you are probably familiar with, is that the standard model of technical development is and software development is iterative development. And so the idea is that you are periodically taking a chance, taking a moment and an opportunity to continue evolving your processes as you are doing with. Okay, I'm getting a message made that I am really breaking up, and so I'm just going to go ahead for about 30 seconds, move closer to my router, and be right back. I apologize sincerely for this. What I might actually do, if everyone can still hear me for a second, is set up our first me not talking exclusively activity. So I would love for you to, Amanda, I'm going to ask you to time keep for this. We're going to do an exercise called 1, 2, 4, all. We're going to take a minute, and I'd like you to think for yourself about an experience you had. Pardon me, checking those notes again. I'd like you to think about an experience you had, good or bad, where you worked with someone with technical skills or language or experience that you didn't have. Is that question clear? Is that prompt clear for everyone? Okay, great. So I'd like you to take a minute on your own to think about a specific occasion, again, good or bad. Hopefully I'll be back by then, but if I'm not, what I'd love for you to do is grab a partner and share those experiences. And we'll take a minute or two, Amanda, let's take 2 minutes for that. After that, Amanda will let you know the time. And please gather in groups of 4 around one of these cylindrical cocktail tables and have a short discussion amongst that group of 4 about those experiences. I'm going to be right back in a moment. Is the ask clear? All right, let's give it a shot. Be right back.
Hi, my name's Milton. David?
Can you hear me?
How are you?
Hi.
It's good.
Hi.
What was the question?
Oh, just a second.
I was muted.
Let's see.
Do again,
Worked with somebody who
or
has
two?
technical
Kind of
knowledge
who just
that you did not have.
My partner teach me how to
Good or
play
bad
over here.
experiences.
Yeah.
It's a head scratcher.
How are
Yeah, I
you?
mean that's actually a good example. If you actually, you know what that makes me think of is my dad
Oh, hey, I'm
teaching me to
muted.
drive. To be honest,
How's it going?
and I was actually starting to think that any show I've worked on, I work with people whose skills I don't understand, but not necessarily like the technical ones. But yeah, I guess by technical you mean like
This is
playing
amazing
with
so far.
machines and technology or stuff. Not
Yeah,
just.
let's
Yeah.
Because I find a lot of what
Like,
actors and directors do kind of
Experience
mysterious.
like this. You probably have more than me.
Oh, for
because,
sure.
You know, you
I
work
mean,
a lot more with technology.
Had more
anytime
in
I've
the
talked
music
about
to work with them, was it good, bad,
fantasy
anything
systems where like
specific?
technology is being
Hello?
introduced, he'll actually joke about how spoons are a form
I'm
of
trying to figure
technology.
out what
Like how far back are we going?
was
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
Also
spoons
in
are
the,
technology. Are we not advanced enough for spoons? Like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
needs of the person I was working with was also
Actually makes me
still
think of the Matrix. You know that scene where they go to the Oracle
figure out like
and they bend the spoon, and then he says, "Oh, it's not the spoon that's bending; it's the universe around you."
or how to
I was just talking about the Matrix to my daughter, which my wife. I think I thought of that, but anyways, yeah.
Very
Yeah,
avid
yeah.
Yeah,
Spoon
well,
is
I
definitely
wanna
technology.
go-
technology and computer
go back
science
in
and all that stuff.
and check it out.
So I feel like my daily life
Actually, really want to watch X-Men.
is just a constant reminder that I don't know what I'm doing technically.
Oh, what's
You're always the person who doesn't know.
Yes,
What's that
yes.
called again? Sorry?
I try my best. I really do, but I just kind of throw it his way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was that?
Hey, I thought I couldn't say
What
hi.
about you, David?
Looks like somebody ended up without a partner. but it looks like also you might be an actor.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Hold on. My partner
Yeah, I mean, we worked with
Hey.
an app developer for a
I
show
think
that
we're
we
at
did.
time to send people for tables. I did not have amplification power, and I don't know how to do that.
Great.
No,
Hello, friends. You're now at time. Please make your way towards your cocktail tables to discover more about each other. Thanks so much.
So I guess we're supposed to like go to one of these.
What color do you want to pick?
Oh,
You know, it's red.
I think so.
So we can move this conversation
Go to
that
the
way.
blue.
Yeah. Jude,
Yeah.
Jude Law. Jude Law's the actor.
Yeah.
Jude Law. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think David Cronenberg's the director writer, isn't he? Isn't that?
Oh, I'm not sure. It was
Yeah, I don't know.
it was a real leap for me to remember a name for the actor.
Which film was that?
Existence.
Oh.
sorry, just
It's a
Jake,
horror
can
thriller
you hear me?
VR movie.
Jake?
Oh.
About the launch
Like a
of
weird
the
echo.
VR system.
I can hear you.
Okay, good.
And
Jake, can you hear
it's
me?
really good. It's really ridiculous. And I
Okay,
love
good.
it.
Yeah. Before,
Been years
the
since I
phone
watched
is
Vancouver.
being very aggravating.
made it
It's
work based
reloading me
off
into
of
the space.
Alex
So even though I'm
Greenfield,
unmuted, the sound starts
where
to
it
cut
was
out
like a
before
kind
the
of
disconnection happens.
participatory
So,
experience
sorry.
where people would give
Okay,
him
no problem.
their contact
Good.
information,
Love
and he
having
went
that
on
internet.
like a month-long kind of journey with them, and they weren't sure when the ends and when it began. But it was all
It's a lot better.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I'm more like Marissa. Like I don't really know much, and just figuring out how to get to this conference was plenty of things to do for me in terms of technology, I think. But I feel like at my organization right now we are going to be working with Cohort to experiment on
We were talking about
augmented reality and ASL interpretation.
D&D and driving.
And so,
Cool.
thankfully, there are experts who are
showing us how it
who
was
are
done
like very
in a
good at
positive
this, and we're
way.
just sort of
They ended up being really condescending about helping us. And we're kind of like, well, I'll do it for you. You don't really need to know how to do it in the future. So that was not a great experience. And that's something that I've had in the past experience with as well. Sometimes people just kind of they don't share it in an open way.
That sucks. That sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you gone through the?
I was sharing. I had a positive experience where I was filming a big musical number once for my web series. I'd never done anything that big or ambitious before. I had the biggest crew I'd ever worked with. I was directing, and but my cinematographer, like, he has way more experience on set than I do, and so like I was just so great to have him there because he kind of had that sage advice to be like, oh, here's a thing that's going to be a problem, think about this, think about that, and like it was just he never stepped on my toes, which he was very respectful of that, which I'm very different from your experience, I'm afraid. But yeah, and so like it was turned into being one of the best on-set
Hello,
experiences I ever had.
friends. It is time now to return to the big
Ooh, that
green
was quick.
circle.
I'm gonna
Thank
your
you all for
story.
chatting. Please return to the big green circle.
All right. So I'd love to ask a couple of people to share something interesting that you heard someone else say in your group, and you can summarize or sort of it can be as small as you want. If I could have a volunteer first. Nobody heard anything interesting in the last 4 minutes of conversation.
Well, I'll go.
Okay, great. Whoever said that, go. Speak loud.
Okay, sure.
And
So I was hearing Jenny's story, and her story, she shared, it was a major pet peeve of mine, and that happened to her very unfortunately, where she was in a project where she was wanting to learn a new skill set for the 3D modeling she was doing, but unfortunately the person they went to for advice basically just kind of did it for them and didn't really like educate them. They were just like, here, in a condescending way, and I hate seeing that, and so I'm very sorry Jenny had that experience. That's what I got. Pet peeve of mine.
That's actually fabulous. I would love to take a minute and dive into that just a bit. Everyone can still hear me okay? Cool. So I was talking with Archana Rajan, who's also on our team at Cohort, and she works in quality assurance. So it's her job when I write code to figure out or to try and break it, basically. And we have a lot of fun in that role. Amanda and I have a similar working relationship. And she described this mentality sometimes from developers as essentially like a chuck it over the wall mentality, which is a bit like, hey, I have my area of responsibility. It's very firmly defined, and I'm going to do my bit and then throw it over to the next person and not really, like, that's it. That's good for me. I'm good. And I've had this experience. I don't tend to have this experience as a developer, but I've certainly had this experience with developers or with other developers. And one of the things that Arch and I have talked about were how do we get from these behaviors to talk about values that can help us, like not just tell a collaborator or a developer that what they're doing isn't working, but how do we have conversations that we can try and be on the same ground and understand each other's values? And one of the values that felt like a really useful thing to talk about in this case was stewardship. And by that I mean, it's the opposite of I'm going to build my thing and throw it over the wall to the next person whose job it is to work on it. Stewardship means that all of us on a project have the responsibility that that project needs to be able to keep going. Even if in theater we talk about the bus factor, but building the capacity of a team to do meaningful work on a project is all of our jobs. And so a potential way that might be useful to talk to developers is to say, do you really want this to just stop? Do you really want this to be something that only you can work on? That felt like an interesting value to talk about. So a couple of specific tactics around that value and that sort of type of conflict might be questions like, when you're talking to developers, whether they're already on your team or you're already in collaboration with them, or whether you're hiring, think about looking for people who are excited to find a shared language. And in theater, that's what we do. In theater, dance, create indie games. I'm pointing at, but in these small creative project teams, that's a big part of it. And so we need to choose the people we work with and help the people we work with build skills around finding shared language. Another thing is that as a developer, I conceive of my job to include education, and that's mutual, to include learning. I do have a bit of a compulsive love of learning from everyone around me and also educating everyone around me, and it's taken a long time to understand the socialization of that, in the sense that the intent can be very different from the impact. And I've worked with a lot of developers who, came into the industry with that same mindset of like, I'm going to share all the knowledge I can all the time I can, and then start to understand that means that has implications in terms of how much space they take up in a group, in terms of how much space they take up in a conversation or a room, and it's really hard for all of us to find that balance. So opening up those conversations can be, I think, really useful. The last thing I would encourage, as far as when you're looking for developers, or if you're thinking about people you're already working with and how to help them become a better collaborator, is that, oh, and my phone just locked itself. Great, there's the note. Right. My job as a developer includes being excited to learn things that are outside of my discipline. And that feels really fundamental. So I think it's really awkward to work with a technologist or a technical specialist who doesn't have that trait on a creative project team. I've just never seen that really work very well. and if you talk to Toasterlab's Andrew Simpere, I think he and I had some conversations about that and came to the same kind of conclusion. So that's the chuck it over the wall pathology. That I think.
Jacob?
Yes.
Just to say also that that's incredibly common in theater, right? For any of us
Yeah.
who have worked anywhere remotely close to industrial mainstream theater, the set does, first the playwright, or probably first the commissioner, then that we work, the mainstream of theater works in an incredibly waterfall, hierarchical, chuck it over the wall framework. And so it's not only when we're dealing with the technologists, but also when we're dealing with the artistic directors and technical directors and production managers and Harborfront Center staff, right? Like we have to deal with those shitheads, or we don't, right? Or we use other spaces. But like that exists in our field also deeply.
Yes, and I have actually run into it as much there. What is interesting to me is always that line where when you're building something, like I feel like the people who are in this environment here are probably people who bias towards making different things rather than making versions of things that exist or working in formats that are really well understood and well explored and well articulated. And so I think that's always going to be, to some extent, the case when you're working in new formats and when you're working with organizations that are designed around old formats. I think personally, the good experiences I've had have mostly come down to having an internal patron at the organization. And so that those are some of those experiences would be with TIFF, with Harborfront, with the National Ballet. If you have an internal patron or champion of the project that you're trying to bring, sorry, just getting little messages. That's really useful. And a warning sign is if you get assigned an internal patron who does not have any power, authority, or responsibility within the organization, they are not going to be able to help you. And so that would be the caveat that I would add to that. I would love to throw it back open and see what other interesting things did you hear other people talk about during your conversations?
We were joking about how we think technology, as it's known, is limited, and that everything has its own technology. So, joking about spoons and the Matrix, that spoons are a form of technology.
Absolutely. I think my favorite expression of that is technology is what we call things that don't work properly yet. Paper is a fabulous technology. It's just really well understood, and we know what it can do and what it can't do, and how it works and how to pass it around. And so I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Other interesting things from your conversations earlier? Go for it.
It's not really something that I heard, more kind of like a question actually to you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It seems to me that big sort of part of the conflict which might arise in the example that was brought up before, but also in the context of what you're talking about, is the difference between the process of doing something versus actually just realization of a product. So in traditional, well-defined sort of theater, it's often a product-oriented thing because there's a clear script, there is clear delineated tasks or roles to greater or lesser extents for individuals to do. But it sounds to me like what you're talking about and the way that you're approaching your conversation about development is more like devising in theater, where it's actually the process and outcome are sort of part of the same thing, and it's not. And even when you get to outcomes, it's more like this is how far we got. It's
Yeah.
endless versions of betas, some better betas than others.
Software
is that
is never done. You just stop at a certain point.
Right.
That's a really good observation and a question. I think that there's an extent to which, because software is a technology in that we don't know all about it yet and it doesn't really work perfectly yet, when we're making software, even if it's in service of something, even if I'm building a way for a show to like broadcast push notifications during a show. When we're making software, we're generally making something that hasn't been made before. And so to an extent, every software project has that difficulty of process and product become merged. So one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the idea of scope, because that's sort of how in technology land these discussions get focused, and how we can decide how to spend the time that we have. So can I just ask, can somebody give me an attempt at a working definition of scope as you would understand it in your own practice? Don't worry, I just want to get someone other than me throwing an idea in there. If I say the project scope, tell me what that means. I'm gonna volunteer somebody. All right, Milton. Oh, tell me what scope, what you think of when I say scope.
Voluntold. Okay. So scope, as in what are the furthest reaches of what is intended for the project?
Love it. The furthest reaches of what is intended for the project. Now, I would love to just point out this is so important in software. If you take a look around, how far do you think the gray floor that we are standing on goes on?
I don't know.
Effectively, probably mathematically forever-ish.
How do you measure stuff in VR?
Scope becomes really, really important because when you're working with software, a lot of things are unbounded by default. And so being able as a team to talk about what we are and are not going to do becomes really important. A couple ways that these are a couple sort of bullet points that I found really useful to keep in mind when discussing scope. The first thing is when you're talking to a technologist or to a programmer, somebody with skills that you don't have, and who you are relying on, a really, really important thing is that you not explain the solution that you want. A really, really important thing is that you explain the problem. Because that is your first opportunity to get this person, this technologist or this developer, actually excited mentally, intellectually, emotionally about solving this. And that's the energy that I think helps a lot. So one thing is always talk about the problem and not the solution first. Solutions are things that you come up with together and attack together. And so I think that's a first really valuable thing you can do. Does that prompt any questions? Just checking in. It's great. I'm really enjoying being able to actually see everyone. Another thing, and this has kind of become a common or a slightly more common thing in the culture, is the idea of what is the minimum what is the smallest thing you can do? What is the smallest piece of your concept, your idea that you can break off and tackle first? And that's sometimes talked about in terms of minimum viable product, or MVP. Thank you, Aiden. And the idea with an MVP is that you have to start somewhere. And if you are working iteratively, your first few, whether it's your first few weeks of development or your first few days in rehearsal, let's say I'm going into a devised theater process, which I've spent over the last year, over the last 2 or 3 years, I think I've been in 4 substantial devised theater processes as a technologist. That idea is partly about lowering expectations. If you're in a devised process, do you really expect to get a lot of finished work done in the first 2-3 days? Somebody spends time in those processes, David? No, I'm seeing him shake. Yeah. So that first time together is better focused on learning about each other, on talking about scope and talking about values and talking about developing shared language, learning from each other about how we work together. And so breaking off a very small slice of actual functionality. So if it were this world, the minimum viable product is basically a floor. so that we don't fall through into the infinite depths. That's enough for us to do everything we've done today, except for the, having nice little coffee tables to convene around. So that's a really useful tactic when you're approaching a technological project. There's two more things I'd like to mention when we talk about scope. Thinking in stories. If I say the word user story, put up your hand if that's a word you have heard, a term you have heard. All right. Okay, David in the blue sweatshirt. Can you tell me the context that you heard user story, or that you've encountered it?
Sorry, I was muted.
Okay, no worries.
I've heard it in generally in terms of like a narrative framework for like game mechanics.
Awesome. Okay, yes. So just in case anybody didn't quite hear that, in the context of a narrative framework around game mechanics. And so for me, a user story is a way to start getting really granular without getting really technical. And the Mad Lib structure that I tend to use is, as a blank, I want to blank so that I can blank. And so what we get in there is a subject, so like the person, the role, the person, the type of user who wants to be able to do something. We get what they want to be able to do, and we get what that enables or why that's important to them. That captures a ton of information in one sentence, and we can compose larger arcs for a user by arranging those stories. I would love to do a simple example of this. Based on your experience in AltSpace VR during this conference, what is something you would like to be able to do that you have found yourself unable to do?
Well, everybody wants to fly.
Hey, okay, I want to be able to fly. Who is saying this?
It's Chris.
Sorry, Chris. How would you describe your role in AltSpace VR?
A new user.
A new user, great.
A newbie.
So as a new user, I want to be able to fly so that, or because. I think, can you give me the because or the why on that?
I don't know, because it's human nature. It's exciting.
Great, that's fine. That's good. That's enough. It does not need to be a long thing. Thanks, Aiden. So as a new user in AltSpace VR, I want to be able to fly because it's exciting. That is something that technologists on a team, that UX people on a team, that spatial designers on a team, everybody can actually understand that. It gives them a person to anchor that to, or a type of person to anchor that to, and it gives them a clear sense of the what and the why. I've just been notified by Aiden that is time, and this is the end of our workshop. And I know that there are other things happening and people have stuff to go to. I'm going to stick around in the world for a little bit if people want to chat and catch up. I do want to say a big thank you for joining us for this. And yeah, if you want to stick around for a bit, that's great. If you have things to get to, no problem. Thank you so much for coming today.
Ha 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 ha!